Advanced engineering in the temples of the pharaohs. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, episode 118.
Yeah.
Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, high atop the Edwards Plateau.
All true.
It is finally cooling down here in Texas.
I'm wearing a long
Kyle's
sleeve shirt.
Wearing long sleeves, that's what I was going to say. Yep, the cold is rolling in from the north, finally getting some rain, some cool. Yeah. But what we don't have is the Watcher, because he's having technical difficulties as usual. So
nothing new here, folks.
Right.
No secrets.
No secrets are being disclosed. Yeah, so we just want to take this opportunity to tell the Watcher to up his technical game.
Yeah.
And, you know, you guys start sending him emails.
Join the Facebook group.
Yeah. Join the Facebook group and tell the Watcher to fix his technical problems so that he can be on the show. Because what he's doing right now is sitting around in his secret bunker deep beneath his secret space station, messing with his laptop. I mean, it's like, this is the Watcher. You're supposed to have control of all the world's computers, and you can't even get a laptop to work to join the show.
That's right.
Yeah. So.
And I can't laugh today because when the cold blew in, it blew in something, and I went down in flames. I was in bed for 2 days.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm still recovering chest congestion.
Yeah.
A sinus congestion, and but otherwise feeling okay. But don't make me laugh.
So that one guy who doesn't like all the laughing, guess what? 50% less laughing in this show.
Yeah. Favorite episode about to happen.
Favorite episode for that guy. It's just going to be me laughing. Okay.
You don't want to hear me laugh.
Yeah, you don't want to.
It's not
You'll
funny.
have to start. We'll have to hit both cough buttons.
Yeah, that's right. That's all it's going to be.
All right, let's go ahead and do space weather news. From spaceweather.com, Arctic Aurora Watch. Around the Arctic Circle, auroras are likely on October 20th when a minor stream of solar wind grazes the Earth's magnetic field. The gaseous material is flowing from a southern hole in the sun's atmosphere. Also, a 60,000-mile split end.
No.
The solar cycle is currently reaching a... I used to know how to say that word. Nadir? Is that right?
Don't know.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's Nadir.
Nadia.
Nadia? That could set 2019...
Just say it like Graham Hancock. Nadia.
A Nadia. That could set 2019 apart as the deepest solar minimum of the space age. Sunspots are very scarce. Because the face of the sun is blank, observers are turning their attention to the edge and indeed finding things to see. Amateur astronomer Alan Friedman sends this picture from his backyard observatory in Buffalo, New York. Wow, that's from a backyard observatory? That's pretty impressive.
Wow.
Yeah. So he says, on October 15th, I saw this prominence in the process of being released from its magnetic bond to the solar disk. It looked like a very tall, wispy tuft of hair with a split end, which I measured to be about 60,000 miles high. Prominences are glowing clouds of hot gas held together by filaments of magnetism. When they rise over the edge of the sun, they can become easy to see through properly filtered telescopes. Prominences come in all shapes and sizes. Indeed, Friedman saw another one yesterday that looked like a fish. Browse the photo gallery for more examples.
That's awesome. Never heard of it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks like some kind of little sea creature or something.
A giant 60,000-mile long sea creature.
Little. I mean, it looks little. But yeah.
Yeah. But that's amazing. Like 60,000 miles. That's how many Earth diameters? A lot.
Don't know.
Almost 10.
26,000 miles? I can't remember.
Not circumference, but diameters, like 7,000.
Oh, okay.
So it's almost 10 Earth diameters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you going to post that in the show notes?
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes.
Don't lie.
I will.
Check now, folks.
So if your name
See
is
if he's lying.
if your name is History Shift and you don't see any pictures in the show notes, don't make the video yet. Because that happened on not the GMA show, but the one before. I posted pictures like the next day after he had already made the video. And I was like,
he works fast.
yeah, I know. Faster than me. So, yeah. All right. We got some one-up boxes.
Yeah.
One of them is a one-up sack.
Tear at perforation.
Tear at perforation. I don't see a perforation. Oh.
Yeah.
Aha! This is the original Czech pipe tool manufactured in the Czech Republic by,
Tamper tool?
I don't know, it's called Mr. Brog.
It's got to be a tamper tool.
It's probably a tamper tool. Tear at perforation.
Dang it.
Let's see.
Here, while you're doing that, I'll open this other one.
Okay. Yes.
Save our listeners some time. Oh, hey.
Hey.
That's classy.
Yeah.
Congratulations, man.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'm going to use a lighter to open this box.
Set it on fire.
I forgot my pocket knife. Burn it. Oh, yes.
Oh.
Okay.
So, I'm assuming these are from good friend of the show, Mr. David. They were sent to Russ and Kyle del Serpente.
Your dark matter is here for cloud chamber testing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's awesome. Hello, Snake Bros. Your dark matter is here for cloud chamber
Cloud
testing.
chamber testing.
That's awesome. So we got some tobacco from pipes and cigars. Wow. Let's try this. I have a terrible cough. I bet this will really dampen it, calm it down a little
Calm
bit.
it down a bit. Where is the...
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. Two one-up boxes from the same guy. This is man, this tamper tool is great. So it's a 3-in-1 tool. It's got a tamper, and then it's got a pick, and then it's got a spoon.
Very
It's
nice.
great, yeah.
All right, I'm going to empty out what I've got in here.
Okay.
So I have I've been through a couple of different, I don't know, 4 or 5 different types, an ounce a piece. And there's some pretty good stuff that Archer brought, but I think my favorite still is the Cavendish.
Oh.
Well, not necessarily Captain Black, but the black Cavendish
Yeah.
type. So
Yeah. Rich black Cavendish. Where's that other ashtray?
this kind of looks, I don't know, here. Let's use that.
Okay.
All right, so what do you got?
Well, I have listener communications. While Kyle loads his. Oh yeah.
That smells good. I bet
Smells
you this.
good.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we have quite a bit of these communications. I want to read them all, but I can't. Let's see. I got them back up here. Okay, so this one. This is from the Snake Uncle. Based on it, this was about the show that we did about our trip to Vermont. He says, Snake Bros, I need to pass along a correction to info I may have given you during the quarry segment of your Vermont visit. The average weight of a serpentine block raised up out of the quarry is about 26 tons, per the quarry owner.
Ah.
A very pure serpentine block could weigh as much as 30 tons. These blocks are usually in the neighborhood of 5 foot by 5 foot by 10 foot. My apologies if I'm the one that told you 10 tons. By the way, next weekend, the quarry owner has a few thousand guys lined up to move a bunch of these blocks using lots of small diameter logs and sand ramps. I bet you he's going to build a 100 by 100 by 100 cube of serpentine science. But hey, you don't need to bet. You already know he'll do it.
That's great.
Yeah. So listen to episode 116 to get that joke if you haven't heard it. Let's see, what else do I got here?
So I guess this type is LBB-TB. Not sure what that means. I'll have to look it up. I'm gonna try it here.
Okay. I got to make sure these are... Yeah, okay. This is from Jeff. Says, hey guys, your podcast is great, and I've been plowing through them as fast as possible. I deliver office supplies and listen to at least 3 episodes from you each day. You are super hilarious, and I love both your interest and subjective dedication to all these subjects. I was wondering, and not to plug other podcasts, if you have heard Matt LaCroix talking about the conquering of America, the land of the serpent, and the symbolism of the eagle and snake on Sam Tripoli's Tinfoil Hat podcast. The associations he presented blew my mind. I think he might be an excellent guest for you guys, and it's on point with your theme. And then he gives links to the episodes. Anyway.
That sounds cool.
You guys are so informing to me, and I'm so happy you now get to prod Randall for knowledge. Don't give up on the moon! Keep up the good work, bros. P.S. Snacks! Oh, he says, in my previous email when I said your subjective dedication, I meant objective. Just wanted to clear that up.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, Demian. This is
yes,
Snake Sister.
Sister Snake.
Sister Snake, Demian here. Heard your offer for my own custom, super exclusive Snake Bros email address. Hell yes. I loved your idea of Sister Snake at snakebros.com. I understand that it will be just a mask from my name and communications will be from my actual, not nearly as cool email address. Needless to say, I think your podcast rocks. I remember as a young girl asking questions like, when did time begin? And where is the end of outer space? Listening to you guys has reawakened, or is it reawoken, my curiosity that had been dormant for so long. It is mind-boggling how easy it is to coast through years and years on autopilot, eyes open, but never really seeing a thing. So whether it was fate, serendipity, the proton density, or whatever else, the first time I listened to you guys, it was like someone lit my butt flap on fire. For this, the knowledge and thoughts you share, your infectious laughter, and so much more, you have my deepest thanks and a Sister Snake for life. To the pyramids, Demian.
Oh my God,
that's freaking fuzzies.
Thank you so much.
Speaking of proton
warm
density,
and fuzzies,
I keep forgetting.
That's actually that's really inspiring.
Yes.
Honestly, because man,
yeah,
wow. Thanks.
Speaking of proton density, solar wind speed 429.0 kilometers per second. Density is 2.2 protons per cubic centimeters. Yeah, it's nice and chill.
As soon as that cold blew in, I was like, oh, wait, something else has also changed.
I forgot to read the proton density on the last one, too.
There was less resistance when I was moving through space.
Yeah, clearly. Okay. So, comments on the website from episode 117 with GMA, The History of Precision. This one is, and I want to say, before I forget, those of you who send us emails, make sure to say in the email if you don't want us to read it on the show, because I will otherwise assume that I can read it on the show if I want. I'm just saying. So if you don't want, if you just right at the beginning, say, hey, no need to read this on the show, and then I won't, and I'll know that that's not what you want.
Or he'll get mad and be like, dang it, I want to read this on the show.
If I get mad, I'll reply and be like, I want to read this on the show anyway. And then you can argue with me. So, but if you make a comment on the website, I'm assuming I can read it because it's out there for everybody to see. Yeah. So this is from Finitorium or Finitorum. He says, I am a surveyor for a contractor in Iowa. A large part of the business is building foundation work and steel erection. I stake out grid and wall lines to ensure anchor bolts and wall dimensions are true to plan dimensions. As quality control check for my staked points, I like to keep the residuals between calculated and as staked points to not exceed 0.01 inches. After listening to you talk about micrometers and nanometers, I feel like my tolerances are not tight enough. Thanks a lot. I think I am going to stick Johnson to all of my work shirts.
We talked about doing that too.
Yeah. I mean, we want word shirts that say Johnson across on the name tag. Love the show. Keep up the great work. Snacks! Matt Vogt. Yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, great comment from...
We feel the same way when we have to go build something or lay something out on the ground for the orchard or whatever. And we try to do it precisely.
Yeah.
But we're just, all the time, we're just like,
Yeah.
how?
Yeah, because you can tell, even with the tools we're using, that there are little errors that get in, and there's not really much you can do about it. I mean, you could sit there
you could, but it's not economically feasible.
Right.
You know,
could spend like
what's the point?
40 minutes per point trying to get it exactly right, but it's just, So, all right. So the next one, this is another comment on the same show, History of Precision. This is from Alcoholic. It's 2 words. Alcoholic. I worked for an aerospace company for 20 years, and the precision in manufacturing parts has always amazed me. I would often ask machinists, how do they make such precise machines, and how do they develop this? I never got an answer. This presentation satisfies a lot of my curiosity. Thanks, Snake Brothers.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, GMA.
Thanks, GMA.
Yeah. Fantastic presentation.
Yeah, it was really good. Okay, and this is from the stash.
Still blown away by Johnson blocks. I can't believe that. That is the irony.
Yeah. Yeah, that's classic. The joke's on us.
I know. So great.
As always, the joke is on us.
Where can you go to get comedy like this?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Especially
It's
when
like
one
2
guy...
years building up a joke.
Especially when one guy can't laugh about it right now. So this is from the Snake Stash, our dad, about episode 117, Snake Sons. I really enjoyed GMA's presentation of the history of precision from our known past to today. As to the use of rulers for measuring length, I can attest to first-hand, quote-unquote, knowledge that my 6th grade teacher, Sister Mary Richards' ruler was not accurate. She used it on my knuckles so many times and on slapping the blackboard to point out my mistakes in sentence conjugation that it couldn't possibly measure a foot. I think my ruler was way more accurate at the time, but wouldn't dare mention it, as she was also handy with a textbook to the back of the head. The use of 3 slabs to ensure flatness was a great lesson. Verifying one of the statements in the podcast about making glass flat, I recently heard from my brother, who was developing some instrumentation for a glass company. The glass executive explained that they float their molten glass on a bed of liquid tin. According to his story, this glass is used for our cell phone faces. So that's how they make it so thin and perfectly flat. They melt tin and have a pool of it, and then they pour the glass onto that.
Wow. That's freaking
And I actually
cool.
mentioned that. I was like, I think I remember somebody showing, and that was Dad showing me.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anyway, I love the show. I love the way the show progressed to comparing our present-day precision tool technology and then jumping back in time to the precision of the giant granite boxes in the Temple of the Serapeum. Having great respect for GMA's knowledge of this subject makes his wonder at how and why such precision was needed on these boxes even more awe-inspiring. Great show. Keep up the good work. Snake Stash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Father.
Yep.
Love you.
Got an email from the dad and the uncle on that one. So I think that's all I got for the listener stuff here.
And we actually got a special donation
Oh, yeah.
from Brandon for that episode, actually. He says, here is a processional donation for your precisional podcast. That episode with GMA was great. Your podcast is of Johnson block caliber.
Oh, no.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes.
Much appreciated. We are not going to share any of it with GMA.
That's right.
But we will.
GMA gets no cash.
That's right.
Our guests are unpaid.
We will tell him
Yeah.
that we got paid extra for his episode.
Yeah, we'll tell him about that. All right, so I do have a couple of reviews here. Best podcast music. They have the best intro and interlude music. Oh, and a very interesting show too. I'm not sure if I read that. I probably did already. Next one, the nice Snaky Boys. Thank you guys for this podcast. You guys are truly energizing the togetherness of this community of temporal temple thinkers. Your journey of embedding an injection of deep knowledge and connectivity into the cosmos is emerging with your wonder and laughter, and the rhythmic harmonic of your alchemical puffers makes all of our minds dance with the language of the birds. Peace and snacks! From Australia.
Oh, that's awesome.
Alchemical puffers.
Yeah. Yes.
Dance with the language of the birds.
Thank you, Scotty.
Yeah.
For the alchemical puffers.
Yes. Also, this is
And Dave, it's David, right?
Yes, David.
This is fantastic tobacco.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Instant fan.
All right.
So.
It also looks very finely. Yeah.
It's really nice. It
Yes.
smells great.
All right, this one more review here. It says, snakes, of course. First off, sorry it has taken me so long to leave some feedback on here. This is from History Shift. I must be half Johnson on my mother's side. 1 star, stop laughing.
God. I'm not.
LOL, I just wanted to say that whether you are new, now he's talking to the listeners. I just wanted to say that whether you are new to the Brothers of the Serpent or have been listening for a while, now that you have come across the literal diamond in the rough, I love the banter back and forth and how you guys build off of each other's ideas or Kyle's skirp-derping. So stay tuned. I promise you won't regret it. Support these guys and send them straight to pyramids. Why? Because they are hard, of course, and almost impossible hurdle. Enjoy the shows. I've got to go. There is a baby crying in the woods, and I better go find it. Glad you're here, your friend History Shift. He's throwing in his all of our terms. There are no babies in the woods. Don't believe it, Brandon. All right. What do you got?
I got some news stories, folks. Stand by while I pull them up.
Stand by.
On my electrospectrometer. From the Daily Star, U.S. Navy pilot describes dark mass coming up from the depths. Did you check out this story?
Sorry, say that again. I was totally distracted.
A high-ranking U.S. Navy pilot has claimed a chilling dark mass was seen coming up from the depths of the ocean moments before a torpedo disappeared, 10 years before a world-famous incident. Retired U.S. Navy pilot Commander David Fravor first shot to public attention in 2017 after describing how his squadron witnessed a 737-sized object just under the surface of the water during training exercises in the Pacific Ocean, 160 kilometers off the coast of San Diego. The incident, which happened in 2004, became known as the USS Nimitz Encounter.
Oh, yes.
After pilots then saw a Tic Tac UFO in the skies near the mast.
Yep.
In an explosive new account, the pilot has shared another UFO mystery that has, quote, come out of the woodwork, unquote, since his story first emerged. Talking to Joe Rogan, Commander Fravor said another pilot once had a similar encounter in the late 1990s off the coast of Puerto Rico. So if you guys listen to Joe Rogan, you already know all this. I haven't listened to that episode.
Oh, I haven't either. I listened to an earlier one, but I haven't listened to this one, the Tic Tac Nimitz stories.
He explained the pilot was flying a CH-53 and was going to pick up a BQM, an unmanned drone used by the U.S. Air Force. A diver was dropped into the water to hook it up and to then fly back when something truly bizarre happened. Quote, they're 50 feet above the water. He sees this kind of dark mass coming up from the depths, he added. As they hoist the BQM up, he's looking at this thing going, what the hell is that? And then it just goes back down underwater. Once they pull the kid and the BQM out of the water, this object descends back into the depths. The pilot thought the incident was pretty weird, but incredibly, the same thing happened a few months later. Fravor said, he's out picking up a torpedo. They hook the diver up on the winch, and as they're lowering him down, he sees this big mass. Quote, he goes, it's not a submarine. He's seen submarines before. Once you've seen a submarine, you can't confuse it with something else. This big object, kind of circular, is coming up from the depths, and he starts screaming through the intercom system to tell them to pull the diver up.
Oh, wow.
And the diver is only a few feet from the water. He continued, "They reversed the winch, and the diver's thinking, what the hell is going on? And all of a sudden, he said the torpedo just got sucked down underwater, and the object just descended back down into the depths. They never recovered it." Commander Fravor said the helicopter pilot was adamant the torpedo didn't sink, as it literally looked like it got sucked down.
Wow.
So, guess we'll have to listen to that episode of Joe Rogan.
Listen to that Joe Rogan.
Sounds pretty interesting.
I heard that guy on Skeptico. He did a great interview with the Skeptico guy talking about the Tic Tac observations. So, and the Nimitz thing.
Cool.
So, you can hear him on Skeptico as well, is what I'm saying. But yeah, check out the Joe Rogan show as well.
Yeah, we'll have to check that.
Yeah.
All right, so now my next one is from CNN World. Former NASA scientist says they found life on Mars in the 1970s.
Yep.
Did you read this one?
No.
You know about this?
I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
"We may have already discovered the essence of life on Mars 40 years ago, according to a former NASA scientist. Gilbert V. Levin, who was principal investigator on a NASA experiment that sent Viking landers to Mars in 1976, published an article in the Scientific American Journal last Thursday, arguing the experiment's positive results were proof of life on the red planet.
Yeah.
The experiment, called Labeled Release, or LR, was designed to test Martian soil for organic matter. It seemed, quote, "it seemed we had answered that ultimate question," unquote, Levin wrote in the article. In the experiment, the Viking probes placed nutrients in Mars soil samples. If life were present, it would consume the food and leave gaseous traces of its metabolism, which radioactive monitors would then detect. To make sure it was a biological reaction, the test was repeated after cooking the soil, which would prove lethal to known life. If there was a measurable reaction in the first and not the second sample, that would suggest biological forces at work, and that's exactly what happened, according to Levin. However, other experiments failed to find any organic material, and NASA couldn't duplicate the results in their laboratory. So they dismissed the positive result as a false positive, some unknown chemical reaction rather than proof of extraterrestrial life. Quote, "NASA concluded that the LR had found a substance mimicking life, but not life," unquote, said Levin in his article. Inexplicably, over the 43 years since Viking, none of NASA's subsequent Mars landers has carried a life detection instrument to follow up on these exciting results.
Right.
But now, decades later, there are more and more promising signs. NASA's Curiosity rover found organic matter on Mars in 2018, and just last week it found sediments that suggest there was once ancient salty lakes on the surface of Mars. What is the evidence against the possibility of life on Mars, Levin wrote? The astonishing fact is that there is none. Levin, a maverick researcher who has often run afoul of the NASA bureaucracy, has insisted for decades that it is more likely than not that we detected life. Now he and LR co-experimenter Patricia Ann Stratt are calling for further investigation. NASA has already announced that its 2020 Mars lander will not contain a life detection test, Levin wrote in the Scientific American article. In keeping with well-established scientific protocol, I believe an effort should be made to put life detection experiments on the next Mars mission possible.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. He proposed that the LR experiment be repeated on Mars with certain amendments and then have its data studied by a panel of experts. Such an objective jury might conclude, as I did, that the Viking LR did find life, he wrote. NASA's Mars 2020 rover is set to launch next summer and land in February 2021. It carries an instrument that will help it search for past signs of life on Mars, the Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals instrument, dubbed Sherlock. The rover will look for past habitable... Very fine. The rover will look for past habitable environments, find biosignatures in rock, and will test those samples back on Earth. But if scientists fail to find evidence of life, that will end the hope for human exploration. Mars 2020 will also test oxygen production on the planet and monitor Martian weather to to evaluate how potential human colonies could destroy the planet with climate change. No, that's not what it said. Anyway. How potential human colonies could fare on Mars. So,
yeah, I remember reading about that. There was an old life test on one of the, I can't remember which one it was, but
that's a brilliant test.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yep.
Yeah. Put some food in there, see if it gets et.
Yeah, exactly.
Burn it. Do it again.
Yeah.
See if it doesn't.
Fire.
Set it on fire. Put some more food in there. See if the food stays.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
Brilliant test.
And there was it got a positive result, and then they claimed they weren't able to duplicate it, and so they never sent another life test out there.
Yeah. That's, I mean, sounds conspiratorial. I mean,
it does.
It's like, that failed. Let's never try it again.
Right. But let's try everything else multiple times. Yeah, exactly.
Weird.
It doesn't fit the model. Life on Mars wouldn't fit the model.
That's true.
So.
All right. Well, I've got one more story, but we could do it.
Yeah, let's take a break.
The next segment.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
I'm puffing on this great tobacco.
All right. Well, we got a new Funk Hill Jam coming.
Oh, yeah.
Snakes. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, your one-stop shop for all of the mysteries of the ages.
Brothers of the Serpent Funk Cast.
That's right. Old Hill Boy feet. Daniel on
is that Daniel
on
playing
the bass.
Yeah. All right. I should have known.
I was like, all we need is 1 minute. 1 minute of greatness. He pulled through.
He delivered.
He delivered.
All right.
Anyway, it's in its infancy.
Yeah.
But
still being worked on, but still bumper music worthy for sure.
Yeah. All right, I got one more story.
Yeah, let's hear it.
From NPR. Strange news from NPR. Not one drop of blood. Cattle mysteriously mutilated an organ. NPR. In the early morning light, dust from hooves created a fog of Sylvie's Valley Ranch in remote eastern Oregon.
All right.
NPR.
Enough of the NPR.
I'm sorry.
Welcome to National Public Radio, folks.
A terrible, terrible story of cattle mutilations. NPR. Yeah. All right, I'm sorry about that. Okay, but this is really strange. Headline is, quote, not one drop of blood. Cattle mysteriously mutilated in Oregon. In the early morning light, dust from hooves creates a fog at Sylvie's Valley Ranch in remote eastern Oregon. Cowboys whistle and talk low to their eager herding dogs. They're moving the cattle from one vast, sage-studded range to another. 5 young purebred bulls mysteriously showed up dead on the ranch this past summer, drained of blood and with body parts precisely removed. Precision? The ranch's vice president, Colby Marshall, drives his truck down a U.S. Forest Service road. Quote, then we'll get out and take a little walk to where one of the bulls was found, and the carcass is still there, Marshall says. Coming upon one of the dead bulls is an eerie scene. The forest is hot and still, apart from a raven's repeating caw. The bull looks like a giant, deflated plush toy. It smells Weirdly, there are no signs of buzzards, coyotes, or other scavengers.
Yeah.
His red coat is as shiny as if he were going to the fair, but he's bloodless and his tongue and genitals have been surgically cut out. Marshall says these young livestock were just reaching their top value as breeding bulls. The animals are worth around $6,000 each. And since these were breeding bulls, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of future calves were lost too. Finding these young Herefords in this remote country, I had to look that word up.
Yeah.
Hereford.
Hereford?
Hereford. I think that's how you pronounce it. In this remote country can sometimes take the ranch's experienced cowboys days. Ranch staff members are now required to ride in pairs and are encouraged to carry arms. It's rugged, Marshall says. I mean, this is the frontier. If some person or persons had the ability to take down a 2,000-pound range bull, it's not inconceivable that they wouldn't have a lot of problems dealing with a 180-pound cowboy.
Yeah.
Theories abound. Harney County Sheriff's Deputy Dan Jenkins has been working the cattle cases and has gotten dozens of calls from all over, offering tips and suggestions. Quote, a lot of people lean towards the aliens, Jenkins says. One caller had told us to look for basically a depression under the carcass. Because he said that the alien ships, well, kind of beam the cow up and do whatever they are going to do with it. Then they just drop them from a great height.
Yeah.
Jenkins says the cases have been tough, with little evidence and no credible leads. On his whiteboard, he has a running list scrawled in green marker with the top theories. What's clear, it isn't bears, wolves, cougars, or poisonous plants, nor were the animals shot. The FBI won't confirm or deny that it's looking into the multiple slaughters. 2 years ago, and 200 miles south, near New Princeton, Oregon, one of the Andy Davies cows was also found cut up and bloodless. She and her husband drove concentric circles around the corpse, but they never found any tracks. And in this dusty country, everything you do leaves tracks, Davies says. Back in the 1980s, one of Terry Anderson's mother cows was mysteriously killed overnight. Standing at his ranch near Pendleton, Oregon, Anderson points to the exact spot where he found her on top of a mountain. He remembers his cow lying dead, her udder removed with something razor sharp. And not one drop of blood anywhere, Anderson says. He has never gotten over it. It just left a really strange feeling with me since that day. You can't explain it, Anderson says. And no one else has been able to explain it. The Harney County Sheriff's Office continues to field calls on the killings. And Sylvie's Valley Ranch has put up a $25,000 reward for information that could solve the case. So, that's the NPR story. But, yeah, that's just crazy stuff. And I know you had talked to me a lot about this long time ago.
The first recorded one was a horse, actually. And it was kind of widely distributed, or the story was widely distributed through newspapers. But it was the same deal. It was a kind of a prize horse, and the main strange things are total exsanguination, which is complete
the
loss
blood.
of blood. All the blood's gone. Yeah, not just there's no blood around, but the animals have been exsanguinated. Like they don't have any blood in them for the most part.
Now, is there a modern machine that can actually do this?
I mean, yeah, you can exsanguinate someone. I mean, they do it. It's part of the embalming process, for example.
So they can do this.
Yeah, you fill people with embalming fluids by exsanguinating them first.
Yeah,
it's got a machine that sort of runs it through.
Okay,
pumps the blood out and the fluid in. For the most part, don't quote me on that, but you can do it. But it requires hooking up to a machine, and and then of course the fact that there is no predation is interesting. Like the story there mentions, there's no buzzards or anything, or even flies, right? So in a lot of the cases, there aren't even flies on the carcass. And the first fly is supposed to land on the carcass within 8 minutes of death or something like that.
Yeah. 80 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, depending on the weather, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No tracks in and around the animal. So he mentions somebody asked them to look for depressions. And that is because some of them are found in depressions and their legs are broken. It didn't say that that's what's happened to these cows, but that has been the case before, where the cow is found in a depression in the field and it's got broken bones as though it was dropped from a height. Not that the depression was made by some kind of alien ship coming down, but that the cow itself made a dent in the ground by being dropped from a, so you drop a 1,500 pound, 1,000 to 1,500 pound animal from a couple hundred feet, it's going to make a depression in the ground and break its legs. So, so no tracks around it. Sometimes they're in depression with broken legs. And then, of course, the surgical nature of the quote-unquote mutilations. It's weird to call them mutilations when it's surgical, but I don't know. I guess that's the right term. And then it always targets the same stuff. The soft tissue, right? So tongue will be removed, sometimes half the face. Like you can see the picture where it's like it's been surgically cut and you can see bones and they're clean. And the cuts themselves
and
are
they've looked for tool marks and stuff on the bones. And
or there are tool marks and they seem to be tiny, like it was made with surgical tools.
That's really weird.
But yeah, so they go for the eyes, they go for the sinuses, the rectum, the genitals, the udder. Not usually any, meat that you would consider consuming. It's different stuff. So there's theories there's been quite a bit of work done on this, and some people have suggested that it's the military or some black budget thing. Or in other words, that it's the government trying to track something by looking at cattle. Right. So this goes into conspiracy theory of so the government is tracking some chemical or some radioactive stuff, and they're looking at the cattle to see because the cattle is always around humans, right? And so if you can check the soft tissue of cattle, you can get an idea of how much of it is getting into people.
Okay.
So
some weird Chernobyl type stuff, something's blown in and they're trying to find out.
A lot of them happen in Utah and Nevada, places where lots of nuclear tests were done. So people have speculated, are they checking for radiation levels in these cattle to see how it's affecting the...
Why wouldn't they just get their own cattle?
Right. That's the big question is
buy the cow.
The military can get their own cattle and then do whatever they want. And they don't have to fly silent helicopters in and never land and never leave any tracks and totally exsanguinate the cattle in the field and then leave.
Yeah.
And even if the military is doing it, that doesn't explain zero predation.
Yeah.
The military takes off and leaves a dead cow, buzzards are going to come and flies and stuff.
I mean, has anyone done an experiment on exsanguinating? Is that how you say it?
Exsanguinating.
Exsanguinating a large animal and then putting it out there and just see
if stuff will come to it. If that changes what happens, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
That's really just...
So what's interesting is that actual state, I can't remember if it was representatives. I'm sorry, federal representatives. So House members or senators of states actually were getting involved in this because, so if you're in a state, let's say that you're one of the two senators of a Wyoming, and you have a lot of cattle ranchers out there, or Utah or whatever. You're one of these, you're a senator at one of these states, and big cattle ranchers are losing tens of thousands of dollars of animals. Six dead prize Angus bulls can mean $20,000.
If it was a military operation to check levels, why would you take the prize?
Right.
You could just take the runt.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Why would you kill the prize Angus bulls or whatever, the heaviest ones that are,
Yeah.
And that, but anyway, the point is that these cattle ranchers were calling their representatives and their government and being like, guys, local law enforcement has failed to stop this. Even if they had good sheriffs or even good veterinarians, a lot of times the vets would just be like, well, whatever. And they'd say, oh, it's coyotes, and they wouldn't really look. But the good vets that went out there and actually did tests went out and looked at a bunch of the bodies. Are like, okay,
It's
a doctor
anomalous.
is doing this,
Yeah.
right? Whatever it is, it has anatomical knowledge and is using tools. It's not
Yeah.
chewing by animals. So yes, a coyote, like crows, buzzards, vultures, coyotes will go for the soft tissue first. They'll eat the tongue, the lips, you know. So the birds will eat the eyes, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't. There's clear signs of being chewed on.
Yeah.
Like I dare anyone listening to this, get yourself a big steak and try to make a surgical cut across the steak with your teeth.
Just use corn. just try it on corn.
Yeah, try it on corn. Yeah, yeah. If you're a vegetarian, try it on a cucumber. Right? You still can't do it. So
Stop
yeah,
it.
teeth are not like, you know,
Yeah.
surgical razors, basically scalpels.
So what are the best theories that you've heard out there? I mean, there's no tracks, so how is somebody?
It has to be
How
from
is
the
some
air.
doctor?
Right. So this is why the military theory comes in, because they
'Cause
have
it's from-
like
yeah.
helicopters. I know. It's like the story doesn't get interesting until there are helicopters in it. Now that there are helicopters, I'm interested. We should do more podcasts about things happening with helicopters. So yeah, like I don't personally, I have the same stance as I do on a lot of this stuff, as we do on a lot of this stuff. We don't know. There is, I highly doubt it's military stuff. If it is military stuff, they're using tech and techniques that aren't, you know, that are secret still, which is possible. The military has
Skyhook.
right, silent skyhooks. Because
I mean, if you're,
you would hear a helicopter,
yeah,
you know,
somebody would be like, I heard a helicopter recently.
right. And I mean, so if a helicopter is flying really low, it can be on you before you hear it. That's pretty common.
okay.
Right? Like, you know, if you've ever been around when a helicopter, like a news chopper or whatever, is coming overhead, it can be surprisingly close to you before you hear it. If it's low down, the higher up they are, the farther away
That
they
makes
are when you hear
sense.
it.
Yeah.
Right? But if it's like a military Apache helicopter and it's like at treetop level, it'll practically be on top of you before you can
wow.
hear it. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. But it still makes a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And you know what happens when you fly a helicopter really low over a bunch of cattle?
Right. Yeah.
They run.
I know some guys who fly in helicopters and actually shoot net guns to capture exotic game,
Yeah.
and they're pretty good. I mean, the game is running
Yeah.
full speed, and they're just like,
Right.
just catch it in a net. But you still got to
That's-
land and go deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, are they reeling it up into the helicopter while it's still in the air?
No, they catch it and put it in a cage, I'm assuming.
Okay, yeah. Because I mean, like, I guess I could imagine, you know, you got a pretty good net and a cable system. You could get a net to wrap around a full-sized Angus bull that weighs 1,500 pounds, running full tilt.
Yeah, the net's to stop it,
Right.
not to lift it up.
Yeah.
Grappling net.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it trips it or whatever, it falls.
Yeah, it gets wrapped up in it, and then
Yeah.
you can't.
A cow will break a lot of legs doing that. So that's one good point.
Yeah, they don't do that. Oh well, yeah. I guess you. Yeah.
A bull in
But
full
there should be
stampede.
signs of like you should see
Yeah,
the
like-
tracks and then the whole disturbance
Right.
area.
Yeah.
because they don't just give up as soon as a net touches them.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about a lot of the cattle mutilation accounts I've read are when the researchers have been on scene soon after, like say it's the next morning, right? They already know that it's happening, so they're in the area, and then some rancher calls them in the morning, like 4 a.m., and he's like, dude, you know, come out now, I got a problem. So they come out there, and what's weird in some of the cases is the behavior of the other cattle. Like they'll describe them as being disturbed, like the cattle is, restless or whatever, but they are all watching. They're far away. They won't come close to like the mutilated one will be all by itself. And all the rest of the cattle is over here, a couple 100 yards away, but they're all looking at it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll encircle it and like make a whole bunch of noise, but it'll be all by itself in the middle of this gigantic circle of cows, all looking inward.
That's weird.
Yeah.
That's weird stuff.
Yeah. Let's see what else. Okay, so there's no tracks, like I said, no blood on scene, and often no blood in the animal at all.
What do the scriptards say?
That it's animal predation.
Okay.
I mean, that's pretty much what they say. Is it's totally explained by, by natural predation of
classic.
Whatever.
I should have guessed.
Yeah. Yep. And sometimes they haven't been found for a couple of days, and there's still anything on them. Like there will be.
Do they decompose normally, or they last a long time? Because like the way that story was,
they won't stink.
Yeah, that's what the story kind of made it out like something weird. It smelled weird. He didn't say it smelled like normal.
Doesn't smell like a dead cow that shat itself and whatever. Yeah, all that stuff.
That's weird.
Yep. And no blood. Like so, if you have all this, so one idea is that the cow is dead a long time before all the cuts were made, and this explains why there's no blood all over the scene. But then they can't explain how it died.
How do you remove it? How do you remove the blood of it?
Well, okay, if in cases where they don't know if it was exsanguinated necessarily, because that's not always checked.
Okay.
But let's just say that there's just no blood all around it or on the ground or whatever, right? So one explanation for that is that the cow was dead for a while before the cuts were made, which explains why it didn't bleed.
Yeah. But there should have been
There should still be, yeah.
Before,
Yeah.
Unless it was guarded,
You can't guard it from flies.
Well, that's true, yeah.
I've tried to do that. Fly starts flying around your food, can't guard it. It's going to land on it.
Dang it. Can't stand those guys.
And yeah, sometimes they don't. I'm not saying always in any of these cases, right? But sometimes they don't decompose properly.
Yeah.
Like I know I've read at least a couple of cases, and maybe this was in the Skinwalker Ranch book, but I know there was a couple of cases where it basically mummifies because nothing eats it.
Wow.
Like not even bacteria.
Seems like if this was a big problem, as it appears to be, that somebody would have taken, a specimen to a sort of like coroner for animals. Right.
Veterinarians, the good ones, but they have to do it on site because they're enormous.
Yeah, that's
animals.
true.
But
like analysis to find out if there's been chemicals pumped in place of the blood, or
yeah,
that would keep.
Maybe I don't know. I've never read of any cases where they're like, formaldehyde was replaced.
Yeah, exactly.
No, they just seem to be drained.
Yeah,
I was just saying that there are machines that can do that. They do it by replacing it with.
Right. Yeah, I know.
But you can just suck all the blood out too. Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah. What are you gonna do with a whole cow full of blood?
I have no idea. That's got to be a lot.
Yeah. But to me, the kicker, let's ignore the tracks problem and all this other stuff. Like the surgical precision implies intelligent agency, right? That it's not an animal. Period. And so then you have to ask, well, okay, who could be doing this? This is why the military is the first thing, because like who you can't even figure out. Okay, so I'm sorry. Another popular explanation was cult, quote unquote, activity.
Yeah, 6 gallons of blood.
Wow. Yeah. Good job, Watcher.
20 liters.
Yeah, that's a lot of blood. But yeah, so another, at least back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when this was happening before, when there was a big rash of it, back when Linda Moulton Howe did a lot of work on it. So I'm sure the Grand Watcher knows a lot about this because Linda Moulton Howe like basically did her best. To me, I think her best work was on the cattle mutilation stuff. But one of the possible explanations back then was cult. It was some kind of cult thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, it was Satanists doing.
Still doesn't explain no tracks.
I know, it doesn't explain any of that. Yeah. It ignores all the same stuff as the animal predation ignores, to use that.
Yeah.
The problem is that it also immediately, so like you either have these prosaic explanations, like it's just regular predation that just looks weird, or it's Satanists running around in fields getting blood for their sacrifice or doing sacrifices or whatever. If you don't accept those explanations, then you either have to go full conspiracy or full alien.
Yeah.
Those are the other explanations, right? And since there doesn't seem to be any in between,
yeah,
it's either left unanswered or people are just like, look, it can't be those.
It's
things.
sort of eerily similar to the raining frogs and fish and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
like and this is the other way around. It's like, here, let's take some of this cow's blood and his tongue and his udder, and we'll make some frogs. And we'll drop them somewhere else.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's like this similar.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like
Yeah.
something from the sky is doing weird things to stuff on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Unconventional explanations, I guess, could be, I don't know. I think of Fae folk. They do weird stuff.
Oh yeah.
Or what
Sasquatch.
maybe Native Americans would call, well, yeah, I don't know, Sasquatch, but what Native Americans
He
may
leaves big
call, like,
footprints.
yeah, he does leave big footprints. What Native Americans call forest guardians or something. I don't know. Like, I can't, it seems technological in aspect, you know.
Yeah. It'd be weird if there were old records of, you know, ranchers and stuff, like real old ones.
Yeah.
You know, guys who were writing journals and stuff.
There are.
By hand, dipping feathers into ink,
Yeah.
saying that they found their cows with like no blood and
Yeah, there are. I can't remember that the earliest known account of cattle mutilation was sheep, I think, and it was in Europe.
Is this where the chupacabra
Some
legend
people think
comes
it's the chupacabra, yeah.
No, I mean,
That's not where it comes from.
oh, okay.
No, chupacabra is an older idea, but some people say that the chupacabra is the,
But
yeah.
goats drained of blood,
Right.
basically.
Yeah, goats fully exsanguinated. But the chupacabra is supposed to be a vampire type of thing.
Now he's got better tech.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And he's going after bigger stuff.
Yeah. Man, that is just a weird subject. I
Yeah.
don't know.
But what seems clear, at least in the most anomalous of the cases, is that technology is involved. It isn't, it's just not something you could do even with rudimentary tools. You would need actual, and it's somebody with a good knowledge of anatomy too. So, of cattle anatomy, bovine anatomy.
So yeah, this story is October 8th. And there's an image here of one of the cows. Crumpled carcass of a bull lies on U.S. Forest Service ground. It was among several killed and mutilated this summer in eastern Oregon. So yeah, I mean, How do I get this picture?
Yeah, and I can't remember if I finished up on this thought about the government getting involved, but people basically complained to their representatives and got the FBI involved in it, or at least look, see how it's all.
Yeah, it's just weird.
It's crumpled. It's totally drained of fluid.
Yeah, normally, they're bloated.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just really strange.
Yeah.
I'll send you that. You put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you finishing your thought?
I was just saying that, like, back in the 70s when this was happening before, people got their their state representatives involved in it. I can't remember if it was a senator. I'm trying to remember who it was. There was a specific guy who finally was like, he was hearing all these complaints from big cattle ranchers in his state, and he was like, okay. And he actually goes to the federal government, and he's like, guys, we need the feds in here. Figure out what's going on. So.
And then the FBI won't confirm whether or not they're looking into it at all.
Yeah.
Weird.
And they never really seem to. I can't remember off the top of my head whether they released any results of their previous investigations of this or not. So, yeah, it's strange stuff. I don't think it's the military. I can say that.
All right. Well, you heard it here first,
but
folks.
It could be
maybe not first, but you heard it here.
It could be the breakaway civilization. Who knows?
Yeah,
if there is one.
And these huge masses coming up from the ocean, stealing torpedoes.
Yep. It's definitely the South Pole Nazis.
Found life on Mars.
Right.
Everything we know is wrong.
Yep.
All right, what's next?
Let's take a break.
Yeah.
Yep. And we'll come back and do some Christopher Dunn.
Now that looks like a human snake.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, second hour. So, after that fantastic show that GMA did for us last week, he left us this book, Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, Advanced Engineering in the Temples of the Pharaohs by Christopher Dunn.
Yeah.
So I have been going through this. I've been kind of skipping through. I skipped the entire first half of the book to read what I wanted to read about. I'm going to go back and read that stuff, but the first half of the book, he goes through the statues, the big Ramses statues, some of the stuff at the Luxor Temple. With the face profiles and how he had to go back multiple times to get the right pictures. But I skipped forward to the later half of the book where he starts looking at the obelisks, and then went from there. But I want to start with there's two forwards to this book, which is really interesting. One's from an engineer, fellow engineer, and the other forward is from the CEO of Danville Metal Stamping Company, which is where
Stamping?
Yeah, their machine shop, basically. Okay. Precision machine shop. So this first forward is called Shifting Paradigms. In the mid-1990s, I was co-founder of a NASDAQ-listed software company in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which specialized in presenting digital data in a unique 3D immersive graphical environment, also called virtual reality. One particular time, we showed the results of our VR work to an undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation. An abstract presentation of rather mundane Department of Transportation traffic data from various road intersections around the nation. Because of the intuitive display system, without any interpretation training at all, the undersecretary was able to see patterns, anomalies, and trends in his data, striking evidence of unexpectedly massive distortions and errors and perhaps even fraud resident in his measurements but unseen before. So shocked was this bureaucrat that he told the audience of several hundred technophiles, "I will never be able to look at my new data the same way again. Not only that, I won't be able to look at my old data the same way." From this honest and open, spontaneous reaction, I coined the saying, "A paradigm shift not only changes the future, it changes the past."
That's cool.
What researcher Christopher Dunn has accomplished in lost technologies of ancient Egypt and his previous work, the Giza power plant, is more than a paradigm shift. It is more of a paradigm seismic event. Because once a person with a manufacturing or machining background, engineer, technician, machinist, artisan, reads and understands what Dunn has discovered and analyzed in ancient Egyptian stonework, that person will never look at ancient Egyptians the same way ever again. That reader will become skeptical of portrayals of ancient Egyptians as primitives in any sense. The reader will begin to analyze every new Egyptian archaeological discovery to see what else conventional Egyptologists have overlooked. That reader will become part of the new paradigm. In these pages, Chris Dunn demonstrates an underlying system of incredible precision in the machining, layout, and positioning of both individual objects and groups of features, ranging from the tool mark details in the rose-red Rosetta Stone of Abu Roash to the symmetries of the giant head of Ramses at the temples in Luxor, to the layout of the column capitals of the great hypostyle hall at Dendera, to the base of the Great Pyramid itself. Thanks to this work, the modern reader sits back in awe and admiration of the Egyptian geniuses of 5,000 years ago. The ancient artifacts contain amazing messages, but stones cannot speak for themselves. This book speaks for them. In November 2008, I accompanied Mr. Dunn and others to what some have called the Lost Pyramid at Abu Roash, some 10 kilometers northwest of Giza. I was anxious to see the rose-colored granite piece that the author had described to me years before, anticipating seeing the compound radial cuts and distinguishing tool marks. I was not disappointed. To any technophile, this one-cut stone exhibits mute arguments against primitive tools and primitive peoples. More than any other artifact, it embodies an ancient language that still speaks to modern engineers. So I immediately dubbed it the Rose-Red Rosetta Stone of Abu Roash. It's like... It's just a single, like, broken block sitting in the desert out there in this area. But it's got tool marks on it, and the curvature are indicative of, like, it can't be done in any other way. And we're going to go through some of that. It's really cool. So he says, I call the stone a Rosetta because its discovery reminded me of another paradigm-changing artifact. In 1799, Napoleon's soldiers found a curious object embedded in a wall of an Egyptian village. Their original report... A report on a stone found in the village of Rosetta describes a black rock slab inscribed with three languages, one of them being ancient Greek, the other is the unknown Egyptian hieroglyphic writing and the cursive or demotic Egyptian writing. Reading the Greek portion, the antiquarian Champollion was able to translate the names of the pharaohs written within cartouches and thence the rest of the hieroglyphic writing itself. He opened up an eventual understanding of the millions of carved figures decorating the ancient temples and tombs of the Nile. No one would ever look again at the hieroglyphic carvings as mere magical, mystical figures, but would read the translations of experts who deciphered those cuts and reliefs, uncovering the lost history of Egypt. The Rosetta Stone thus facilitated a change in the worldview of moderns who looked back at ancient Egyptians. Nothing would ever be the same. I maintain that this book has accomplished a similar feat, every bit as meaningful to an understanding of ancient Egypt, if not more so. Once understood, Dunn's discoveries will forever change the perception of the serious researcher. In a similar manner to Champollion reading ancient Greek and comparing it to unknown hieroglyphic figures, researcher Christopher Dunn was able to read the machine-cut tool marks on the Abu Roash stone and compare them to those made by modern tools capable of the same operations. With years of experience and a trained eye for details and armed with the proper paradigmatic perspective, Dunn was able to recognize at once what it meant to produce a stone with a curved cut some 37 feet in diameter.
Oh my God.
and to reproduce that cut in small, uniform steps across a 3-foot width over 700 nearly identical radial tool cuts. This feat is simply not achievable by human hands alone, using any known tools. Such tool marks require at the very least a large saw blade or cutting tool and sophisticated fixtures to produce the steps between cuts. To suggest that the primitive tools ascribed to the ancient Egyptians could have produced anything like these markings is ridiculous. In my opinion, this machine stone by itself demonstrates the existence of sophisticated tooling that did not exist again until the 1900s. To the modern engineer, machinist, or toolmaker, the tool marks on the rose-red Rosetta Stone of Abu Roash are proof enough that the ancient Egyptians possessed technologies not replicated until the 20th century, if even then. But Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt shows more examples, each of which have similar impact. The Ramses heads in Luxor, the carvings and columns at Dendera, further reinforcing the genius of ancient machinists, engineers, designers, and planners. Taken together, they represent arguments in stone that refute current Egyptological conclusions. When civilization fails for any reason, metals of all kinds become precious commodities. They become knives, spear points, scrapers, fish hooks, and even plows. Ancient Egypt underwent numerous upheavals caused by droughts, earthquakes, civil wars, religious strife, and foreign invasions. During the times of collapse, the advanced metal tools that the ancient Egyptians used were probably disassembled, cut apart, or melted down. What wasn't immediately used could corrode and disappear after thousands of years. And perhaps some other advanced technology was also employed, the remnants of which we wouldn't even recognize today. Large saw blades and other machine tools, if not secreted away from armies, earthquakes, floods, and mobs, would not endure for very long. Over the millennia, few metal objects from our own time would survive or be recognizable. Life After People, a popular cable television show that debuted in 2009, shows example after example of the deterioration of man-made objects after years merely because of lack of maintenance. In 5,000 years, approximately the time span estimated in lost technologies of ancient Egypt, almost nothing of today's technology would be left. In a world of resourceful and destructive human beings, the devastation would be much worse than Mother Nature alone could cause. Marauding bandits and nomads would reuse, recycle, or otherwise destroy even our ubiquitous automobile engine blocks and our porcelain toilet bowls. It may be that future archaeologists will one day uncover an untouched ancient factory or workshop under the sands or in the caves of Egypt, a place that was purposefully hidden away from destructive recycling, a place that would show us exactly what the ancients used and how. Such a discovery would be the equivalent of the unexpectedly sophisticated 2,000-year-old Greek computational mechanism, the Antikythera device. But to recognize their finds as evidence of ancient technologies, those future discoverers must have minds that are open to the possibilities that Christopher Dunn has been the first to reveal. Otherwise, that advanced machine shop of the ancients could wind up stored in unnumbered boxes in the basement of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, labeled merely as funerary objects.
Oh, yeah.
Recent discoveries at the archaeological site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey indicate that 12,000 to 13,000 years ago, so-called primitives were erecting T-shaped monuments as tall as 6 meters, ranging in weight from 10 to 50 tons, perhaps building a Neolithic cathedral of sorts. Many of these stone pillars exhibit carvings of wildlife and even some human-shaped reliefs. For unknown reasons, the site was deliberately buried approximately 10,000 years ago. Because this site can be dated as existing prior to previously established dates for the beginnings of agriculture and urbanization, not to mention cooperative construction of stone monuments, we can readily believe that conventional chronology is at the least incomplete, if not wholly inaccurate. We see that every new archaeological discovery pushes back civilized development further and further into the past, never in the opposite direction. So here we have evidence of moving massive stones and carving them in intricate detail dating earlier than 10,000 BCE. Thousands of years before the ancient Egyptians were believed to have begun the stone machining that the author examines in this volume and in his previous works. Several thousand years passed between the time of Göbekli Tepe and that of the Egyptian First Dynasty, millennia in which artisans and engineers of ancient times could have perfected their craft, invented their complete suite of enabling tools and supportive technologies, and eventually immigrated to the Nile Valley, becoming part of the incipient civilization emerging there. With centuries of experiment and practice, those who worked in stone could have kept their knowledge secret, offering their finished products to leaders, priests, and the wealthy. As Dunn points out in this volume, even today, trade secrets and proprietary knowledge are closely held, even in an educated worldwide civilization with widespread literacy and training. In ancient times, the impulse to secrecy may have been even more necessary for survival. Alas, the human beings who worked the rose-red Rosetta Stone of Abu Roash, who machined the statues of Ramses, the columns of the Dendera, and the stones of the pyramids, were more fragile and evanescent than the mighty tools they employed in their work. If tools of metal are lost in war or natural catastrophe, their flesh and blood designers and operators are even more subject to the vagaries of fate. Disease, injury, wounds, and famine can take away technicians, inventors, planners, and managers, while leaving behind marvelously fit tools, or marvelous tools fit only for destruction by desperate people ignorant of their value. If the knowledge of a specific task, the operation of a given machine tool, or the procedure for laying out vast projects is resident in just a few people or maybe just one, then the loss of that person or group means the knowledge is gone forever unless it is recorded. This is an eternal problem not limited to the ancient Egyptians of 5,000 years ago. A modern example, in 1992, while working at the White House Science Office, I invited to a meeting there a person from the National Science Foundation. Although only peripheral to the agenda, this older scientist regaled us with a tale of lost technology of modern times, namely, how to start up the engines of the Saturn V rocket that took American astronauts to the moon from 1969 to 1972. Incredibly, this leading scientist averred that no one was alive who knew how to start up the engines on the largest rocket ever flown. No one had written down the standard operating procedure, and the rocket men who had developed the technique had all passed away. So in 1992 CE or 1992 BCE or further back in time, we can find sufficient examples to demonstrate that technologies are not always lost as a result of conspiracy. Ordinary human pride, greed, stubbornness, selfishness, and even carelessness can account for much of our loss. In two groundbreaking works, author Christopher Dunn has opened our eyes that ancient Egyptians and maybe others in the past designed, planned, laid out, and precisely machined stone statues that would be difficult to reproduce even with today's manufacturing technologies. As the first person to uncover and develop this new paradigm, he has gone on to investigate other ancient Egyptian artifacts, temples, tombs, and pyramids using this new way of looking at information. He has retrieved knowledge that all before him have overlooked, save Flinders Petrie, whose interest was not primarily proving ancient advanced technology, merely commenting on interesting findings. A new way of looking at old data could bring new respect to ancient civilizations that left magnificent ruins in a still troubled part of the world. As we understand more about the origin of Egyptian temples and pyramids, we find a way to bridge the past and the present, a way to look for still other revelations that affect us as human beings.
Man, that's great.
That's a great forward. There's another one, but I'm not going to read this one yet. So I want to start with what he calls in the shadow of the obelisk, right? So he starts out looking at obelisks that are standing. Okay.
Yeah.
Because he's like, first of all, these are single pieces of stone. And he was looking at one of the ones that, I think it was the Temple of Hathor. Is that right? The Karnak temple. So there's one of his pictures where he's taking it and, because what he's looking at are all these symbols.
Yeah.
And then this one. Look at that.
They're beautiful.
Yeah. So he says this interesting thing about how the right brain looks at it and then the left brain, because of the way that they're constructed. Yeah. So he says so when you're looking at it, the right brain takes over, and the senses are overcome by the visual effect. Upon closer inspection of the extraordinary lengths of the artisans went to in order to execute the design, the left brain takes over, and it becomes obvious to sculptors, artisans, and engineers that the carving was accomplished with a high degree of discipline, with little variation in exactness and form from one relief to the next, and from one obelisk to the next. So he actually starts comparing multiple obelisks to each other and the symbols that are in there. And he's like, they're the same. Like the owl symbol, which is very common in a lot of the obelisks, it's the same all the way up and down the obelisk. It's the exact same symbol.
Like a stamp.
Right. And then on the other obelisks that are all around Egypt and around the world, it's the same. And he notices the same thing that you noticed when you were looking you were at that museum.
Yeah.
And you were looking at, there's this beautiful carved statue and there may be some symbols in it, but then there's like sort of scratched stuff on there. He notices that too. He points out in multiple places, like, look at these. You've got these deep, deep cuts that are part of the original design or whatever.
Like
and
perfect right angles going in.
Exactly. And then he also measures. He takes wax measurings of a lot of the interior. Like, so he'll melt his wax or whatever and jam it in there so that he can look at the contours.
Yeah.
And he finds some interesting stuff about the contours that shows him that that it has to be machining. Like, you can't do it by hand. Period.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's like the outer edge where the carving goes in is just a perfect straight in, and then a curve will come out from there.
Right.
And it's like beautiful. You know.
Yeah.
How did they do this?
Yeah. Yeah. So he looks at some of the really narrow but deeply cut things, like on the owl's talons, where it's standing on something, a stick or something like that, and those end in these points, right? And the cuts are deep. And he actually does all this camera work and a bunch of other things to look at what the bottoms and what are the inner contours of these very narrow. And he figures out that, like, the way that has this 3D profile in the back, right? So, like, if you imagine you're looking at the surface of the obelisk, and there's this cut into it, so it's got these two side walls of the cut. And then there's the bottom part down in the cut, right? Yeah. And he's looking at the profile of the very bottom part. And the way that it's contoured, he shows in multiple ways in his book that it has to have been a tool that was moved in and out of the material. He calls it plunged in and out, right? He's like, this is the only way you get that. You plunge the tool in, pull it out, plunge it in, pull it out, plunge it in, pull it out, and then you break off the remaining material, and you get this profile at the bottom.
Oh. So it's plunged in and out around the border, and then the inner piece is broken off.
It's broken off, and you get this 3D interesting profile at the bottom that actually, when you back away and look at it, it gives it this strange shadow quality. Huh. So he shows that on a bunch of the very tiny marks. And then he ends up going to look. He's like, I'm going to go look at the unfinished one, because he's looking at how are they cutting this rock, right? So the main one he wants to go look at is the unfinished obelisk at the quarry. Yeah, look at the owl face there. You know, it's just like, and it's the same with the 3 lines for the eyes.
Yeah.
So, so he goes to the quarry to look at the unfinished obelisk. And he does a whole bunch of work there, and he's like, okay, so in the book he goes through how Mark Lenner, the Egyptologist guy, the potsherds dude, he actually in the one of the last chapters I read, he brings all that up or whatever about Mark was like, show me the potsherd, and then he just goes through a bunch of potsherds, right? He starts okay, well, let's look at potsherds, and he's bringing up broken pieces of those pots that were found and showing all these profiles.
Like the stone pots, right?
Yes, yeah.
They didn't analyze the vases themselves.
Right.
They only analyzed the contents of the vases.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, I'm getting off track here, but yeah, because I was just laughing because he keeps mentioning these potsherds. He's like, well, let's look at this potsherd, right? Because he's like, show me the potsherd. He's like, well, here they are.
They're all there.
Look at these lines on them. You can only get these lines. Anyway, so he goes to the unfinished obelisk, and he of course in the book he's giving you all the measurements, right? And these pits that are these trenches that are alongside this thing, are very narrow and incredibly deep. I mean, they're very deep, you know, and they actually go underneath, partially underneath it. And he goes through all the arguments. They're like, okay, so he goes through how I can't remember what the name of it was, but there was some documentary that Mark Lenner did, where he was basically giving his diorite pounder ball and copper chisel argument, and then he actually demonstrates. You know, they've got a piece of granite, and he starts pounding on it in the documentary, and he makes some dust or whatever. Yeah, and then he's like, "So this proves that this is how they did it." So there's actually diorite balls all over the quarry there. He says that they're just laying on the ground, and this is one of the reasons. Yeah. So I started to think that, like, and then he says they're all like 6 inches basically, and most of them are pretty spherical. Yeah. Diorite's very hard, greenish stone. I started thinking, like, what are these, like, ball bearings? You know? Right. Rollers? Because I could imagine if you had a whole bunch of those, hundreds of them, that you could roll extremely heavy blocks around on those things.
Yeah, in any direction, unlike with a log.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, the argument is that these were, they're pounding stones.
Yeah.
So he goes and he finds himself a piece of granite that isn't part of the Unfinished Obelisk or anything else. He's just in the quarry. He gets his diorite ball, and he goes and he finds himself a flat piece of granite, and he starts wailing on this granite, and he's describing how difficult it is. It immediately starts to hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Everything in your hand, right? So he eventually figures out that the best way to do it is you pick the ball up like 3 feet, and then you swing it down and let go at the last second.
Yeah.
And the ball hits and bounces, and you're not part of that impact. And then you catch it, and then you do it again. And, and he's trying to get into a cadence, but he's like, I can't. He's like, I'm trying to imagine, okay, so I'm this ancient guy. Maybe there's some music or there's some tempo going, and I can do this once a second, and I can just sort of lose myself in the mindlessness of it and forget about how awful this job is. But he can't, because every time he slams the ball down, it bounces randomly.
Yeah.
And he has to catch it, right? Or else it can fly away. So he's like, you can't just like go off in some, fantasy or start thinking about your wife or whatever while you're doing this, because you constantly have to keep that ball bounce, and then you got to stop and get rid of any dust you made.
Work.
Yeah. Yeah. So he pounds on this granite for like 5 minutes or something like that. And he's trying to measure the material that he's moving off of it, because he wants to get an idea of like how much material can you actually remove with this process. And he comes to the conclusion that after doing it for 5 minutes and estimating, okay, like this is about how much, he's like, really, it didn't look like I did anything to the granite, but he's got this dust, right? Yeah. So he's looking at the dust and he's like, okay, so he decides to measure the material instead of looking at,
collect it, weigh it.
Right. Yeah. So he removes some tiny fraction of a cubic centimeter or something like that of dust after 5 minutes. So he goes into these long calculations of like how long. So I've moved this much material. Now let's look at these trenches and how deep they are, right? And how much material was pulled out of those trenches. And then he's doing these calculations, trying to figure out how long would this have taken using this.
Yeah. Shouldn't there be shattered pieces of diorite all over the place?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Shattered pieces of diorite balls?
Yeah. Yep. I don't know.
Why are they all whole?
Yeah.
Or maybe they're not. I mean, maybe they, I don't know.
Yeah, and he says a lot of them are egg-shaped, too. They're not necessarily round, so that may, egg-shaped is an interesting...
Yeah.
But he goes through other people's theories. Like one guy was suggesting that they would have a long stick, like a very long stick, and they would actually mount the ball to the end with a bunch of ropes, and then you could stand up there and wail on, using it like a spear.
Yeah.
And he's like... I can't imagine you could do that very long before the stick would begin to shatter.
Right.
Because it's, like you take anything hard and start beating on the very end of a narrow shaft of wood, and it's going to start splitting and spreading apart. So he goes through all these different, and it's really interesting how he does it. He's like, so in this paper they did this, and this one guy did it, and like he actually finds some people who are trying to debunk, people who are trying to claim that it could be done, and he looks at their papers or their claims or whatever it is that they wrote, and he's like, this guy claims to have removed this much material, and he's like, no one else removed anywhere near that much material. This one guy claims that he messed around with it, and he
found a sharp corner somewhere.
Yeah, and this is all, keep in mind, this is all like going straight up and down.
Yeah.
He's like, this isn't even getting into when you're down in the trench where you can't swing the ball, and you got to start swinging it sideways or upwards. Up. Yeah. Yeah. And also he's pointing out, like, look at how sharp the corners are in some of these things. And like, if you have a 6-inch diameter ball, you can't get a sharp corner with no matter what. But yeah, so he kind of debunks a couple of people's studies, because he's just like, look, that they claim that they were able to remove this much material, right? And every other study he found, they removed a lot less material than this guy. And then this guy then just assumes in his paper that because he's not very good at this, that he just figures that the Egyptians who are really good at it could remove like 60% more than he could do.
Yeah.
And that gives him, still a long time. And so then what is it? So he goes and looks back at the record. I'm trying to get this in order. He goes to look at the record because actually at the base of one of the big obelisks that is standing at the Karnak temple, there's an inscription where the pharaoh at the time, which was a female, I can't remember how to say it, Hatshepsut, she was one of the few female rulers of Egypt. She claims to have set these two obelisks,
Okay.
right? And she actually gives timestamps for when the work was started and when they were erected, right? So she began the work at some month, and then at some time later, they're completed and stood up. And so even with this guy, this guy who like first seems to have taken away a lot more material than anybody else did,
Yeah.
and then he increases that amount by another 60%, claiming the Egyptians could have done it way better. Like, even with that guy's numbers for the Egyptians, it still would have taken a lot longer than was apparent in the dates that she gave for the erection.
Right, yeah. Maybe they had a massive diorite Gatling gun. Yeah.
That's why they're just laying around all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. Called the Shamir.
Right. Well, what he eventually just looks at, because he's like, look, if you look at the because there's one exposed side of the unfinished obelisk where you can actually see from the side what the cutting was, what it looks like. You can get a profile picture of it. And so it looks like a bunch of, I don't know, 2 or 3 inch wide scoops that are kind of going downwards, and they're all sort of at the same angle. They have a little bit of an angle. But he points out, and this, I didn't notice this at first, but he points out, he's like, look at the horizontal lines. And if you look really closely, you see that there's a bunch of, that each one of these troughs has successive horizontal, much fainter.
Like it was a chisel taking a scoop out or something.
Yeah, or something like, but all these horizontal lines are actually, they also follow a rough line going horizontally. Okay. So he's like, okay, so could it have been he's thinking about these horizontal lines and how could you reproduce that with tools or whatever. So he actually goes to his machine shop, the Davidson Metal Stamping Company or whatever, and he gives the tool maker he's like, look, take whatever you want, aluminum or something, and here's the drill pattern. And he gives the guy a pattern of drill holes to use. And he's like, do that into the material and then let's cut it in half and see what it looks like from the side. And he's like, this doesn't work because you get the horizontal lines, but they're incredibly regular. But the problem is the bottom. You have all these cup-shaped marks in the bottom because the drill bit stops. Yeah. So he's like, that can't be it. So he ends up deciding it was a chainsaw-like device, just like what we saw at the quarry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But he shows it mounted on a big tractor thing that has a boom, and then the saw is going down like this, so it can boom, right? And he's like, this is what I was thinking. But then when you get to the bottom of the shafts or the troughs, and you look, you see that whatever this tool they were using was actually going around the corner. So let's see if I can find that picture, because he shows it. Yeah, there's one of the diorite balls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, we got to go there, bro.
I know.
I got to check that out.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So here's the side profile. See the horizontal marks, right? And then he shows this is one of the test holes that's nearby that has sharp corners.
Yeah.
So here's the aluminum, where this is the hole pattern he told the guy to drill, and he's like, the bottom is not right.
I see. Yeah.
So here's his idea of the machine.
Yeah.
See the saw blade on the boom. But then he shows, but it was going around corners. That's the bottom.
Wow.
So it was actually coming down, cutting, going around, and then hitting that, and then going back this way and going up.
Yeah, almost like it was a vehicle.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So he just drops the whole thing. He's like, I think it looks like it was done by a chainsaw type device that was plunged down into the thing over and over, but it was going around corners at the bottom, so I have no idea, and he moves on. I thought that was great. That whole chapter on the obelisk was great. Let's see. There is one thing I wanted to read. It was a letter that he got from a sculptor. Yeah, here it is. Because he was talking about the Ramses statues with this guy. This is one of this guy's work. Like, he does these beautiful sculptures. Okay. But they're in like marble. Very, very soft. Marble's like a 4 or something on the Mohs hardness scale. So he sends him all the stuff about the, let's see, he says, okay, so Leonard mentions that having a rapport with the stone would bring greater success, right? That's one of Mark Leonard's. He was like, well, they had a rapport with the stone. So they were better at this. This has a nice ring to it because artists do connect with the materials they work with and seem to develop an inner knowledge of how the material will respond to their touch. This quality of work is not necessarily quantifiable in a scientific sense, but rather is a unique gift that artists and sculptors possess. It was important for me, therefore, to seek the opinion of a modern sculptor who had gained a rapport with the material he has worked with over many years and who has produced significant works of art. So I contacted Mike Leckie, a modern sculptor who has crafted many kinds of marbles, limestone, alabaster, and other rocks into incredibly beautiful shapes. His website presents photographic evidence of and commentary on the stages of creating statues in marble. Cool. So he shows a couple of pictures here.
What's the website?
www.mikeleckie.com. So that's Mike and then Leckie.
All right.
Yeah. So this is the letter he gets from Mike. Dear Chris, thank you for this opportunity. I have been interested in Egypt and sculpture since I was a child. As a stone sculptor, I can say that the granite of the Ramses head and its figures is an extremely hard stone, and I believe tools much more durable than hardened copper chisels must have been used in the carving process. It would be necessary for me to upgrade my normal tools to carve such granite. My modern diamond blades and grinding points would be worn out before the head was even started. The ancient carvers must have had advanced technology. Although the ancient Egyptians had stone chisels and hammers, which could cut the extremely hard granite, even with an army of disposable labor, completing 4 large sculptures exactly alike with hand tools would take more time than we can conceive of as a possibility. Modern man with all of his modern tools would be challenged to finish one Ramses statue in a generous timeline. Creating 4 of them, as large as they are, all the same, seems almost impossible. Best regards, Mike. All right, let's take a break.
All right.
And then we'll come back and I'll do the last segment on giant saw blades.
We are back for the final segment of the final hour. Sadly, but still looking forward to it here, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get it done.
So, what?
Stupid pun.
Oh, I just got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm off my game here. Feeling a little under the weather.
And that happened because the weather rolled in.
That's
right.
right.
Now you're underneath it. I get it.
Yeah.
So, Dunn goes up to one of the quote unquote unfinished pyramids. I think it may be the same one. It's the Great Pit at I can't remember the name of it. But it's at Abu Roash, and they call it the Unfinished Pyramid, but it's not.
It's just a hole in the ground.
Right.
That one that I was talking about a while back, yeah.
So laying around on the ground there are a bunch of it's clearly a construction site, you know. and there's just blocks and random stuff laying around in the ground, and he's kind of walking around looking at the hole, and it's pretty impressive. And he's trying to figure out why do they think this is an unfinished pyramid? You know, because it's this giant, great, huge square hole in the ground with a big ramp going down that's 14 feet across. And he's like, the ramps going down in all the pyramids are like 40 inches wide.
Yeah.
So why do they think that this is like they cut these giant things and they're going to fill it in? You know, that's the idea. Excuse me. I am slightly under the weather as well. So, but he's actually there with David Atcher Childress. So there's videos of this online. You can watch them walking around, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And he finds this thing, and he pulls out that thing with all the holes in it.
Yeah.
And he starts putting it on there, and it's
a straight edge.
Yeah, it's a straight edge. And there's this. When you look at it, you can see that there's an incredibly slight curvature to the top of this block.
Yeah.
Because he puts a straight edge on there, and in the very middle, there's like a half a centimeter of clearance. So it's not totally flat. And it has marks on it, right, that are going along that curve. So when you look closely, you see all these lines that are
like parallel lines.
Yeah, that are going down in the curve and coming back out.
Yeah.
But the curve is so slight that he's like, okay.
If this was a wheel,
right?
How big is that wheel?
How else can you make this without? But the problem is that it looks like it should be cut this way, but because the contour is going, I'm trying to figure out how to describe this just using audio. If you're using a wheel and you're cutting something, you see big curved cuts.
Yeah.
But the surface is flat.
Right.
Right. So the problem with this is that that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing straight line cuts along a curved surface that's otherwise flat. You know, in other words, it's the opposite of what you would expect. Like if you just run a saw through a piece of wood, a circular saw through a piece of wood, you'll see circular lines on a flat piece of the cut. That's not what this is.
These are like straight lines on a curved piece.
Right.
Yeah, because even if you were using a wheel, like a grinding wheel, tilted at an angle,
yeah, you end up with ellipses.
You would still have circular lines, and it would be concave, and the lines would be curved.
Right, but they don't go from end to end of the piece or whatever. Or if they do, they're ellipses or they're...
But I mean, even if you were only using the very front edge of the grinding wheel, the lines would still be curved instead of straight in a curved surface.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
they would be straight if you could hold it perfectly straight.
Yeah, if you could hold it perfectly vertically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this bothers him a lot. So he takes all these measurements. He ends up he goes home and he's looking at his pictures and he realizes that he didn't get good enough pictures because he wants to he wants to do some calculations on curvature and stuff. Since he didn't have tools to measure, the block is big, right? He had his straight edge and some other stuff, but he didn't have what he needed. So he goes back out there with a good tripod and a good optical camera and sets up his tripod in various places and gets pictures straight down and straight at and along. And the block is actually set up on rough stones, so it's up off the ground. Mm-hmm. So he's able to get the camera right at level with it, and take good pictures here and on this side and that side, and he sets the tripod way up high and looks straight down at it and takes pictures, and then he takes all that home and he does a bunch of calculations and figures out that, and he's also trying to figure out, well, how did you even get this object? You know? And what he figures out eventually is that, so one edge of it is rough. So you see this, there's actually a curved edge that's very fine, right? Along the top of the block, and then it's rough, like something was broken away.
Oh, okay.
Right? So the last 3 inches of this object are just a rough break. Okay? But the smooth part leading up to it is a very slight curve in the part that's curved this way. That's curved down as well. Yeah. It's really complex. He's like, this is a complex object, right? This is So he eventually decides that,
This is not a simple cut.
right, exactly right,
This is a complex curve.
right. And it's got, he calls it, he says
Can't
it's,
do it with a stuffed nose.
yeah. So what he eventually, I'm going to see if I can describe this. He eventually decides that this had to be done in more than two cuts, right? But the basic one is first the blade, somebody runs the block into the blade. Basically, he's assuming that they're moving the block instead of the blade because you've got this very slight curve, right? So they cut into the block with the blade until they reach a point where part of it can be broken away. Now you have so you end up with a block that has a cut going into it, and then you can break the top off. Okay, so now you have this relatively flat piece with a rough edge on the bottom side.
Yeah.
Or the far side. So that's why you've got this curve that was made by the blade.
The forward edge of the blade.
Right. It leaves this curve. Then they actually run the block along the blade as it's spinning
Right.
to get that.
Like holding the blade, like pointing the blade straight down at the top of the rock and then moving it along.
Moving it along, yeah.
So it cuts a concave
Right.
curvature.
Barely. Like just barely cuts into it enough to leave this curvature. So that's how you get the curved end
Forward
going
edge.
in one direction and then the curved concave. I'm not describing this very well.
But you couldn't... If you took a circular saw and you cut in one direction and then you turn it 90 degrees
Yeah.
and made a concave cut along the cut that you had made horizontally
Yeah.
first, once you get to that edge that's horizontally curved, how does your blade... Your blade's going to run into the far edges of the curved...
That's right.
Horizontal
That's
cut
exactly
without-
what happened.
Okay, so it
Yeah.
is like that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
You can see it in his pictures. There's this straight, what looks like a straight line with that slight like sliver.
Yeah, above it.
Above
so
it.
It's where you have the horizontal curve, it's not concave.
Right.
On if you're looking down
Right
at
there
the
at that
surface.
very
right
end
at
of it. Yeah.
Got it. Hope you all got that, folks. Hard to explain. We're making hand gestures.
Yeah,
over
we're
here and
waving at
everything.
each other. It's very hand wavy.
It is.
But yeah, you were describing it well. 'Cause I'm thinking of it in terms of a fixed blade, but the way you described it is good. You run the blade. Let's say that you've got a block sitting here on a table. The blade is spinning and it's flat to the table, and you run it into the block, and then you break the top off of the block.
Yeah.
And then you
don't go all the way through.
Right,
just
you don't go all the
part
way
of
through. You just and you pull it back out, and then you break. You've left like a half an inch, and now you can break the top off, and now you've got a rough break, and in this circular cut that's gone flat, and then you can turn the blade 90 degrees to where it's now facing the cutting edge is now facing the ground, and then you run it very very slowly and skillfully, run it along
and
that
not
cut.
deeply, just
Not deeply, just enough to leave the
concave
surface. Imprint from the curvature of the saw in the material. That's what he's like. This is the only way you can do that. Make this shape. He has no idea why. He's like, I don't know.
Why would you make
Why do they make this? But doing all of his measurements on the, getting this radius, and he ends up with between 37 and 40 foot diameter saw.
That's insane. Get me out of here. I don't want to use that saw, Johnson.
So that's when he starts looking at these. He's like, right next to this area and near the Great Pyramid and stuff are these long, incredibly long, narrow trenches that are just slots cut into the limestone. Very, very deep. Right? They're longer than they are deep. But he's like, this is exactly what you need. You mount this giant saw into the slot so that the saw is basically the flat edge of the saw is at ground level.
Right.
So only half of the saw is sticking above ground.
Right.
And then you just start running your blocks into the saw.
Yeah.
You get the block onto a moving table, and the table can roll.
Right. And that's typically how, like, if you're cutting tile, for example, The saw is fixed.
Yeah.
And you're moving the tile through.
And the saw is like only sticking part way up through the table or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's, so he's talking about that. You've got a saw that's basically sunken halfway to its axis into the ground, or maybe a little above, because he's assuming the machinery to spin the saw is part of the axis. So that's, he draws this picture of these two giant mounted things that are mounted to the side of the slot, and then the axis is going along that. Yeah. And then the saw is, and he's like, yeah, they would have had to have bearings. You're talking about serious stuff here.
Yeah.
But then he does this interesting calculation. He's like, well, let's look at modern cutting edges. He's like, if you take he was talking about a 1-inch diameter diamond drill bit, right? So it's a hole saw, diamond edged. When you're spinning it, it's like 900 RPMs. So he figures out what the actual speed or how much travel that is, right? How far does it travel in 1 minute?
Yeah.
So at one point on this saw, when you run it for a minute, how far does it go?
Right.
It's going around in a circle that's 1 inch in diameter, and he figures out it's like, I don't know, I can't remember how many feet. And he's like, well, if you had a 37-foot diameter saw, it only needs to go 2 RPMs to get that same travel on the edge. So it's spinning you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically. But the edge is going incredibly fast.
Right.
Out at the cutting edge. So he draws this cool picture of think of a train, kind of like a train cog wheel. It's got these spokes going out.
Yeah.
And then those spokes are welded together at the edge, and then there's the cutting material is at the far edge of that, very thin. But the wheel itself is pretty big. So he was like, so basically they had to run the block into the saw and then turn it, and then run it.
Yeah, turn it 90 degrees.
Yeah, turn it 90 degrees and then run it along
the edge
as the blade is spinning. And he shows that he's like, look at the way there's a continuous, precise irregularity in the lines that are going along the concave cut.
Like they're moving so one revolution, they've actually moved the block past a place. So like if the saw is irregular in any way, it cuts this one a little bit deeper, and then when that same side comes around again, the block's moved along a little further, and it cuts it deeper again.
Yeah. That there are very regular irregularities.
Yeah.
And he blames that on like slight wobbling of the very outer edge cutting material of the tool, and the inability of whoever is doing it to move the block perfectly along the saw edge.
Yeah.
But still,
or whatever type of machinery was moving the block is also irregular.
Yeah.
In a regular way.
Right. Yeah.
Consistently irregular.
Yeah. And he never gets into why did they cut this. He was saying, like, let's just assume that they were, I think the diagrams he shows, he's like, let's assume that they were cutting, pyramid casing stones.
Yeah.
Right. So he shows like you have a square block and they cut into it at this angle that will leave you with a pyramid casing stone once you break this part off.
Yeah.
But then they took this part that was the broken away part for whatever reason and started cleaning it by cutting these other. Maybe they were testing the tool. Who knows?
Maybe. Or it was, it was just Johnson was out there like, oh, well, it's after work. I was going to make this thing for my wife. For the bathtub.
Yeah.
He doesn't do it right. He's like, it's too hard.
Yeah. Just leave the broken part on there. Throw it aside and go home.
Hey, how come you didn't finish that block, Johnson? Just couldn't get the saw to work.
Yeah.
Like they come back the next day and the saw's broken.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and he talked about how with a blade that big, and of course no one's ever made a blade that big to this day.
Yeah.
There aren't any cutting, not circular saws.
Yeah.
You can make really long chain, like we were looking at the quarry, those chains can be incredibly long, but there is no circular saw cutting blade that's...
I mean, that would be ridiculously expensive, and then it would wear out.
Yeah. You would have to be... The tool ends, the tool part, the cutting part would be replaceable segments. And he talked about that. They would have to have stacks and stacks of segments, and you'd have to slow the thing down and stop it, and it must have tons of angular momentum because you got this. He's basically showing this incredibly heavy steel web work that at the very outer edges is holding a tool cutting surface or a tool cutting edge. Really
the
cool.
only thing that doesn't make sense, like the spokes idea, unless the spokes were narrower than the cutting edge, you can't move a block past it in a straight line.
Well, yeah, the cutting edge is, yeah. Let's see.
You know, it would have to be a really fat cutting edge. But anyway,
he goes through this guy's theory of they've got a long copper saw.
Oh my gosh.
And they've got the two teepees, and it's hanging from ropes. And then they've got guys with ropes on either end, and they're pulling on it, and then the other guys pull on it, and they're pulling on it, and they're slowly letting it down bit by bit.
Oh my gosh.
And they've got a pool of water with their basalt blocks sitting in there, and this guy's like, oh yeah, they could totally... No. Petrie, he goes through all this stuff with Petrie, where Petrie's like, look, you can see by the tool marks that they had fixed, what he called fixed jewel cutting tips.
Yeah.
Which is what we use. You make a saw blade, and you have some kind of matrix at the end that has diamond jewels fixed in the matrix that does the cutting work.
Right.
Let's see. I'll show you see if I can find the drawing. He's got it. So there's the saw.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, the spokes are inside. They're the way you were illustrating it with your hands made it look like they were like a bicycle tire has spokes.
That's his drawing from the front.
Okay.
So the cutting edge is very thin, but the spokes are wide. See?
So it can only cut a wedge shape. Yeah.
Well, no, the cutting part is probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet.
Oh, okay.
And then the spokes are the central rotor part.
Yeah. So you can move it in so far before it gets to the wider where it starts to widen out.
And then you got to flip your block around and cut it. And then he explains, he's like, look, it's so many of these cuts. There's this in the middle somewhere. There's this tiny
discrepancy or something where.
Yeah, and he's like, either the block shifted in a whole bunch of these cases in the middle of the cut, or they turned the block around and cut it from the other side and met them in the middle.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I thought when I first saw this idea that those trenches were holding gigantic saw blades, I was like, I don't know about that, man. But reading this in the book, I'm like, okay, I buy it.
I'll buy it.
I buy it. Look at that trench.
Wow. Looks like it's partially full of sand too.
Yeah, it's full. It's filled up with sand. But it even has the,
like notches cut out.
Yeah, so he's actually got a picture of Abu Roash and that trench, and he's got the saw drawn in there. That must have been, I mean, if that's what it was, that must have been cool to watch.
Yeah, that would have been really awesome.
Shamir, giant wheels.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I went through in this, do we have time? I only got 3 minutes. Well, I'll just mention it. Core number 7. We talked about this with GMA.
Yeah.
So a couple things I didn't know. There is controversy on whether or not the grooves on core number 7 are a heliacal thing or if they're horizontal. In other words, is it a screw, basically?
Yeah.
Or are they just horizontal lines?
Yeah, flat horizontal lines all the way down. Yeah.
So if they're horizontal, then something else is happening. That doesn't give us feed rates if they're horizontal.
Right.
It's something else. That's the argument that a lot of the conventionalists, mainstream people are making. But Dunn discovers that they are using in their horizontal line argument, they are using a very deceptive photograph that I think he doesn't say anything about it. But as soon as I saw this, I was like, that's on purpose. They freaking know this. So look, here are the differences. He's showing you on a tapered screw thread, right? So these are PVC tapered screw threads.
Yeah.
Because core number 7 is tapered. It gets wider
okay.
at the bottom. Where it was broken off, it's widest.
Huh.
So it's a tapered thing. And he assumes that that's because the tool is tapered as well. It's wider at the cutting edge than it is above it, and so it ends up with this. Yeah, at the top part, you end up with a wider part. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he was describing how the way the tool is built, you'll end up with this taper where it gets wider towards the bottom. And actually, him and Petrie go back and forth. He's going through with Petrie's stuff, and Petrie's trying to figure out how do you end up with this tapered thing, and he's like, maybe there was cutting stuff all along the tool.
Yeah, that's the only way.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so as the tool keeps going deeper, it's still abrading the upper part.
yeah, well, there's like thread cutting tools, like pipe threaders.
Yeah.
Are the whole tool is like the cutting goes, however deep you want your threads. Like if you want 2 inches of thread and it's cutting pipe thread, the cutting edges are all the way through the whole 2-inch pipe threading thing. So when you first fit it onto the end of the pipe, it's at its widest. And as you turn it and it starts cutting into the pipe, the edge of the pipe as it moves in is being cut deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
By every revolution, because the inside of the threading tool is tapered. It's getting smaller and smaller the deeper it goes.
Yeah.
So that if you were looking at it as in terms of at the base, at the very bottom of your cut, it's the widest it's going to be.
Yeah.
So if you were actually using this to drill a hole,
Yeah.
or like cut a hole into stone, it would have to have cutting tools
on the inside,
on the outside
on
too.
the outside, yeah.
So that the core would be tapered, but the outside may not be.
Right.
We don't have the outside, right?
Yeah. Well, on some of them there are the outside, yeah,
Okay.
and you're right. It's flat
Flat on the outside.
on the outside, and the core is tapered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So he has this picture, which I just lost, and he's showing you the way that they show the picture that everybody uses to prove that the lines are flat. It's tilted. See how he's showing you? See the very slight tilt in the bottom of the pipe?
Yeah.
That allows you to draw a horizontal line across our screw threads?
Yeah.
He's like, every picture of core number 7 where they're showing you that the lines are horizontal, if you very carefully look at it, is tilted at the bottom to allow them to draw a straight line across it.
Oh my God.
And he's like, clearly, if you get it right and you draw your straight line, the threads are obviously tilted.
Yeah.
Because they're heliacal.
Well, just line the threads up with your straight line and then you're good to go.
Right. So he actually does this fun thing where he wraps string around the core itself.
Oh, there you go. What a genius.
And he's like, but the core is very small, it's very old, it's polished by time, and there's inconsistencies and you have to make a choice. And he's like, so I started to think, like, because I think it's a spiral, am I making the wrong choices?
Yeah.
And then he ends up going back there with another engineer who thinks that it's horizontal, and they both do it, and that engineer also gets a spiral, and the guy's like, holy crap. So then what he does is he gets the museum to make him a laminate cast, a
Awesome.
latex impression that he is then able to unwrap and flatten out, and then take all kinds of photos and do a bunch of lab tests on it that he can't do to the actual core because it's a precious object, right?
Right.
And after that, he's like, yeah, it's a spiral. Like, he's got all these pictures showing how it's clearly a spiral. It's very, the showing how if it's not a spiral, then on a straight line, that curved line should hit the exact horizontal line on the other end of the laminate cast.
Yeah.
But it's actually just a little bit below that line every time.
Right.
So it's a spiral. Yeah, so there it is flattened out, and he's doing all kinds of little tiny measurements on it. So he's able to get a way better read on the actual penetration, and it's still, let's see, he actually lists this off. It's really cool. That it was it's still cutting way more than we could ever do today. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to find the numbers in here because I don't have bookmarks, and this is
It's an actual book.
an actual book where I can't just like make marks on stuff. So
GMA wouldn't mind if you drew all over his book.
yeah, he probably wouldn't care. I already got coffee on it. I'm reading it while I was making coffee up at the top. So then he decides, okay, like as a final test, this is really cool. As a final test, he gets himself a piece of granite and he gets himself a copper tube. And he makes this little contraption where he can set a piece of weight onto the copper tube, pressing it down into the granite. I can't remember what the weight is, like 40 kilograms or something like that. And he sets up this whole contraption where he can spin the copper tube using a hand spin it, basically. First, he tries using a bow. He tries using a bow, a reciprocating drill. Right. But that doesn't work out, and he ends up making himself a hand crank at the top, where he can just like crank on this thing, and the weight's pushing it into the. And he uses some corundum abrasive. Yeah. Which is way harder than quartzite sand. Quartz is like 7. Corundum is like a 9 or something. Wow. But the granite he's trying to cut into is like an 8. So he's like, the quartz sand will not cut into this. It's just not going to do it. So he works on it for a while and he cuts through and he gets to a point where, so he's making his core, basically. He's trying to do the same thing of core number 7. He wants to see, by doing it by hand, am I going to get horizontal lines or am I going to get a spiral? Yeah. Right? So he does all this work, and I can't remember how long it took him, but he works on it for a while. And he only goes, I don't know, a half an inch or maybe an inch into the material. And then he gets himself a copper chisel, and he tries to break the core out of there using the copper chisel. And he's like, no matter what I did with the copper chisel, it just bent and folded. And so he ends up having to get a steel chisel to break the core out of there. He can't even break the core out of his cut with a copper chisel, much less actually affect the granite at all. He's like, I put the copper chisel in there into the hole, into the cut, and he's banging on it, and the copper chisel just bends and conforms to the granite, and the granite doesn't even care. So he eventually has to get a steel one. He's like, dink, and he gets it out of there with one hit with a steel one. And then he looks at it, and it's got perfectly horizontal lines on it that are very, very tiny, incredibly tiny. And he also points out that it looks sanded as instead of polished, which is what core number 7 looks like. So, yeah, core number 7 is polished.
Yeah. But he did this with a copper core?
Yeah, he started out with a big copper tube that was very small when he was done.
Oh, my God.
Because he used up tons of copper, But basically the copper is just the action to run the abrasive on it.
Right. So is there, I guess the copper, if they used copper to make all these cuts, there should be, green dirt everywhere. Yeah. Right? Or would it be gone after thousands of years?
I mean, if there was a place where you were doing it with the amount of work...
should be able to find it, like chemical
and he's
tests.
doing a 1 inch, right? There are 14-inch diameter core drills made, or maybe 12 inches. And he's like, look, at that size, your copper tube's going to start twisting and folding. You're just not going to be able to... And also the diameters of the cut, it's like they're 0.03...
Not the diameter,
I'm sorry, the thickness of the cutting edge, yeah. 3 millimeters is what he said was the cutting edge.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So this is a fantastic book. I'm going to keep going through it. I'm going to go through the first part, and we'll get into the Ramses statue and everything. And I can't possibly cover everything that he does on the show. There's his setup.
Oh yeah.
And he shows, like, see how it's got this sanded appearance?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he's trying to describe, so he talks about this thing, what's called a thermal lance.
Because the heat and everything, it's actually making the copper tubing fatter or thicker at the bottom.
Well, he's talking about a thermal lance. He says, example of the wear on the cutting edge of a tubular drill. See how it's getting shorter as he cuts? Yeah, and the bottom is fat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, yeah.
But he talks about a thing called a thermal lance. He's wondering if this is why it's polished. And I was like, yeah, that's the shamir. thermal lance.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we're already 10 minutes over.
No big deal.
I'm gonna keep going through this book and read about the statues and the temples and stuff.
Awesome.
But I have to say, those 4 chapters that I read that started from the obelisk and went through all that stuff, and I haven't even read his part about the Serapeum yet either. So
Oh man,
that's in there. But and in all of his work on Petrie, he found a whole bunch. He got this guy's biography on Petrie that was able to go through Petrie's stuff. So he extensively quotes him in there. And then is like, and then after, so after Petrie presented this information on core number 7 at some conference or whatever that he was giving, and then a bunch of people were like, no, that's bullshit. That can't be possibly true. And then Petrie comes back with more information. He's like, so I took another look at this core, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm right. It's tapered. It gets wider at the bottom. And it is a spiral. It's not horizontal. Yeah. It's a spiral. So
it seems like there's so much stuff out there that
they're just ignoring.
They just don't want to look at.
Yeah.
I'm still blown away by the fact that that no one has really analyzed those stone vases.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, how do you even
yeah.
carve out the inside?
Yeah, I didn't even get into the
mean,
potsherds stuff that he does.
Yeah.
Where he's showing that, he's like, look, it was turned on a lathe. The vase itself was spinning. Right? So it had to have been held by what he called a chuck. You got the... this thing is holding it, and it's spinning the vase. And then because of the interior contours of the vase, you can figure out what tool was being used. Or not what tool, but you can figure out how it was being used. And he shows you that there are multiple radii on the interiors of the vase cuts, which means you had a tool that rotated on a fixed point that was moved multiple times to get these different interior cuts. And then the outer lip, because you could pull the vase down, flip it around to the outside, and then pick it back up, and then cut the outside part of it. But basically a fixed tool that could rotate on an axis.
Yeah.
So he's like, the axis is right in the middle.
You can plunge it down on the inside of the vase and then start swinging
it back and forth, yeah,
to widen out the interior.
And then he's got ones that are potsherds where the vase was broken during manufacture due to an error, and he shows that there's this one shard, and it's got all these tiny little lines on it, and then there's this one deep gouge that suddenly stops. Right? A single deep, sharp-edged gouge that stops. That clearly shattered the bowl.
Yeah.
So the tool plunged too far, and then the bowl exploded, basically. And he's like, look, you can look at this cut and see that this was a single cut. And it plunges into this hard-ass diorite material, almost a quarter inch, just and stops, and the whole bowl explodes. He's like, so it was clearly spinning very fast, using a very hard, incredibly hard tool that was also fixed. No one was holding this tool, because you're not going to hold it and plunge it that deep into the material.
Yeah.
And something happens, and the bowl gets off center, and it the tool goes too deep, and the whole thing explodes. And they're like, God damn it, Johnson!
Oh, you're gonna be okay, kid.
All right. I recommend the book to anyone. Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt by Christopher Dunn. So,
there you go.
End of show.
All right. You guys can get a hold of us at stuffedup@gmail.com. Visit the website, sickasadog.com.
That's not right. That doesn't sound right.
Yep.
Yeah. So you guys know you can get a hold of us, Brothers of the Serpent, at gmail.com. And remember, if you don't want me to read it on the show, say that at the very beginning of your email.
Yeah.
Some people have done that. Thank you very much. But that means I have to respond to you by writing an email, and that's going to take longer. So to those of you who have sent me emails saying that, sorry that I haven't replied yet.
but he has read them.
Yes, I have read them all. And the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Comment there on the shows. Go to the encyclopedia and the glossary. Follow us on Twitter at Snake Bros with no vowels. SNKBRS.
Yeah. Share the shows. Donate to our pyramid scheme so that we can go and also look at all these crazy blocks.
Yes.
And thanks to everybody who has donated.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our Patreon supporters. We have revamped the Patreon. So there are a lot more tiers and they're a lot more interesting. So.
Yeah. And also, if you can't donate, or even if you can, write reviews. It really helps us out. Thanks to everybody who has written reviews.
Yes.
Except for that one guy.
Yeah, the one guy that gave us 1 star that didn't say why he gave us 1 star. But I did see that one person gave us a 4-star review. Don't know who that was.
4?
Yeah, we got 1 4-star. There's no, look.
All right, cool.
If you don't leave us 5 stars, tell us why, and we'll not fix it and keep doing it so that you go away. Yeah, that's my plan.
It's a great plan.
It's a great plan. Also, don't forget about History Shift. You can follow him on Twitter at History Shift. You can read his blog about looking for dolmens and glacial erratics and running from Sam Squanch, historyshift.com. He has actually ran from Sam Squanch at least once. So I'm not making that up. I'm sure he wrote about it on the blog. So if you want to check that out, go to historyshift.com. And you can also follow him on YouTube, and he makes all of our YouTube videos. He makes the podcast into YouTube videos, so you can follow us on YouTube, Brothers of the Serpent. Just look us up on YouTube. Thanks to everybody who has subscribed there. Subscriber numbers going up. We're getting comments on the shows there too, which I have been reading all of them, and I plan on reading at least some of those on the show at least at some point. So thanks to you guys very much for that, and thanks to History Shift for making all those videos. It's really helping us out. And I think he's also moving every show over to another video hosting service. Wow. Yeah. So we also have a Facebook group run by Jordan. So look us up on Facebook, Brothers of the Serpent. I think you have to answer a secret question to be able to get in. I don't know what the question is. I think it's, who are the Snake Bros? If you don't know the answer to that question, you haven't even been listening to the show, so you're probably not listening to this right now, so you're not going to be that guy.
Didn't somebody just start like a Serpentine library or something?
Yes, that's right. So somebody...
Library of the Serpent.
Yes, a Library of the Serpent. Like an open library where relevant texts, scientific papers, PDF files, and other things can be added to the library for everyone to access.
That's an awesome idea.
Yeah, fantastic idea. I think that was Jeff on Twitter.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just another thing. The value for value system.
That's right.
I mean, this is great.
Yeah.
People running the Facebook group, people making the videos,
Yeah.
people making libraries. You guys are really, just.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is awesome. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, archive shows. You can find all of the archive shows on the YouTube channel or on the website. They are not necessarily available in the podcast feed because of limitations in FeedBurner. So if you're wondering why, when you scroll all the way to the back of FeedBurner or iTunes or whatever, and you see like show 27 is the earliest one you can find, that's because of the FeedBurner feed limitations. So just go to the website. You can find the MP3s there to download, or you can go to YouTube and watch or listen from there. So I need to remember to say that at the end of each show. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Good job.
Okay.
All right.
I think we're done.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Good night, Adamu. Get back to work. Turn up, Scotty!